So you want to build your Aventurine? Well, you're in the right place, as in this video I'm going to be showing you everything you need to know about Aventurine, from traces, relics, teams, and even just good characters he works with, making sure that you're completely ready for his release, or just helping you understand how to build him after you've pulled for him. So let's go right into it. So we're going to start off with Aventurine's traces, with the first one obviously being his normal attack, which isn't really anything special. It just deals imaginary damage equal to 50% of Aventurine's defense. So I mean, I'm not going to go too into detail, it's not that special. I mean, every character has it. But what's super interesting is his talent, as his talent called Shot Loaded Right increases the effect res by 13% for a single ally with Fortified Wager. And when this character gets attacked, Aventurine gains 1 point of blind bet. When Aventurine has Fortified Wager, he can resist crowd control debuffs, and this effect can be triggered after 2 turns. But then you may be wondering what blind bet actually is. Well, it goes more into that. It says Aventurine additionally gains 1 point of blind bet after getting attacked. Upon reaching 7 points of blind bet, Aventurine consumes the 7 points to launch a 7-hit follow-up attack, with each hit dealing imaginary damage equal to 25% of Aventurine's defense to a single random enemy. Blind bet is capped at 10 points, which means that over time, characters with Fortified Wager and also Aventurine, if they get attacked, he gets 1 point of this blind bet, which if you get 7 of them, it then launches a follow-up attack, which is super useful, which does a ton of damage for a preservation. And you may have noticed that blind bet is actually capped at 10 points, which means that you can actually overstack these points and use the rest of them for the next go. So after the follow-up attack goes, you may be left with like 2 more points, giving you like a head start, which is super useful. Okay, so now moving on to its ultimate, which is called Roulette Shark. What Roulette Shark does, it randomly gains 1 to 7 points of blind bet, which is super useful because it means you could get a follow-up attack almost instantly, but it's also useful for other stuff, just like, you know, gaining up these points as well. This then inflicts Unnerved on a single enemy target, lasting for 3 turns, and deals imaginary damage equal to 162% of Aventurine's defense to the single target enemy. And when an ally hits an unnerved enemy target, the crit damage dealt increases by 9%. So again, this ultimate is super useful for just gaining points of blind bet and also doing a massive amount of damage while protecting your team at the same time, which we don't see with a lot of preservation units. But it seems like Aventurine is a mix of both, and you can kind of choose how you want to build him. You can either go for a more offensive route, or you can go for more of a defensive route. And I'll show you more on the relics and light cones how you can build them in different ways. Now going on to a skill called Cornerstone Deluxe, this provides all allies with a Fortified Wager shield that can block damage equal to 16% of Aventurine's defense plus 80, lasting for 3 turns. When repeatedly gaining Fortified Wager, the shield effect can stack up to 200% of the shield provided by the current skill. So again, this just explains more about what Fortified Wager actually is. It's pretty much a shield that protects all of your allies, and it's super useful. As you know from the talent we talked about earlier, it says when Aventurine has Fortified Wager, he can resist crowd control debuffs, and also effect res increases and stuff, which provides even more protection, which is just insane. And it can also help to increase those blind bet points. As for the actual traces order, which you want to level up, I know many people are really keen to level up one trace over another, which is totally fine, but I think they are all super important apart from the normal attack, obviously. But if you really need an order, I would say go for the ultimate first, then the skill, and then the talent, because the ultimate provides you with a ton of damage. Obviously, the more you level that up, the more damage you'll do, which is amazing. And if you get it fully to level 10, it'll go from dealing imaginary damage equal to 162% of Aventurine's defense to 270%, which obviously is a massive damage increase. And then his skills next, obviously, because he is a shielding character, and upgrading his skill will obviously help with the preservation side of his kit. And then his talent, which is also very important. I mean, the follow-up attacks are amazing, and I really do suggest you do level up your talent as well. Don't leave any of these out, because they are all really great. It's just that kind of order you should do it in. I mean, to be honest, if you're building Aventurine, just do all of them. Now you pretty much know what his traces do and which ones to level up first. We're moving on to his light cones. Now, as you can see here, I'm actually using my Trailblazer because I don't have Aventurine yet. I don't have that kind of access to stuff. But here I can actually show you some of the light cones that you could use. Starting off with this first one called Trend of Universal Market. As I said before, you can choose to build your Aventurine more offensive or defensive. This is definitely more of a offensive build. So if you don't know what Trend of the Universal Market does, it pretty much helps you provide debuffs to the enemy, which could be great for something like an Acheron team where you need to get the Crimson Knot stacks up, which is amazing. And I definitely suggest if you are going to be running an Acheron team with Aventurine, I would use this light cone because it allows you to get even more points and more damage off with your Acheron. But not only that, the art of it is just amazing. I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm definitely one for using really nice art in the light cone. I mean, obviously it's not meta or anything, but sometimes I just like to do it, especially if they're not a very important character. I mean, just looking at my Herta here, this isn't the best light cone by far, but it looks really cool, so I just used it. But no, definitely Aventurine's best light cone will be his signature light cone, which is called Inherently Unjust Destiny, which essentially what this does is increases the wearer's defense by 40%. And when the wearer provides a shield to an ally, the wearer's crit damage increases to 40%, lasting for 2 turns. When the wearer's follow-up attack hits an enemy target, there's a 100% base chance to increase the damage taken by the attacked enemy target by 10%, lasting for 2 turns. And obviously this is just a great light cone overall. It's his signature, so of course it's going to be, but yeah, it increases his defense, does more crit damage whenever he shields, and just increases the overall damage he does whenever he does follow-up attack hits too. So if you're really all in for Aventurine, then I definitely suggest getting a signature light cone because I think it will help him out a lot, but it's not your only choice. And I definitely think that the signature light cone is more of an offensive build as well, if you wanted to know which kind of side that was on. But to be honest, it could be also great for a defensive build too. As I said, we got Trend of Universal Market, which is also another great great option. Pretty much whenever we're looking at preservation light cones, you just want to look for a lot of defense, because he's going to be scaling off defense, and that's just where most of the damage will come from. For example, this light cone here called This Is Me is actually on the battle pass, so it's super easy to get whenever you level up, and it is actually a very, very good light cone for Aventurine, as it increases the wearer's defense by 16% and increases the damage of the wearer when they use their ultimate by 60% of the wearer's defense. So again, this is a very defense heavy light cone, and it's just amazing. I mean, yeah, you do have to pay money to get the battle pass, but it's really not a lot. But if you're a person that's completely free to play, then don't worry, there is still one other option that you can use, which is completely free. So if we actually go to the Forgotten Hall and go into the shop, as you know, they sell a ton of light cones for these little shards that you get for completing the Forgotten Hall. This light cone here, which I actually already have, is called Destiny's Threads for Woven. And I'm pretty sure this is actually a kind of new light cone that came out. We got Firefly in it and Black Swan that is in the background. And I think that's actually Aventurine there, so, you know, maybe it's his secret, like, 4-star light cone. But this one's super good as it increases the wearer's effect res by 12%, and for every 100 of defense the wearer has, increases the wearer's damage dealt by 0.8% up to a maximum damage increase of 32%. Which, as you know, Aventurine is a massively defense-heavy character, and I will go more into that whenever we get to his relics. So yeah, those are all the options that you have. I mean, this is more of a defensive light cone, so if you want to go for a more defensive build, then I definitely suggest this one. But also his signature and Trend of Universal Market is just amazing too, and you know, all of them could work, so take your pick. But now let's actually get into his relics. We're going to start off by talking about his best stats. So first off, for his body, I'll definitely want defense percent, because obviously he scales off defense and it is super useful. That is one thing you need to know about Aventurine. As long as you got defense, you're pretty good. It covers his shields, it covers his damage, it covers everything. But you could also run crit damage if you wanted to, but I highly suggest against that, and defense is just easier to get overall anyways. Now for his feat, you actually want to go for speed, because you want to make him faster in your team. I mean, you know, it's just kind of a given with almost every character at the moment that you want speed, but you could also run defense too if you have some good substats with speed included. Then for his sphere, you either want to run defense or imaginary damage. Again, I suggest defense, because you really want to make the most of Aventurine's defense scaling, because it is amazing, and I think that running a defense sphere will really help with that. Finally, for the rope, you also want to run defense percent too. Now for the substats, obviously you're going to want defense. I know I'm talking about it a lot, defense, but Aventurine really needs this stat, so I'm trying to make it very obvious that defense, you know, is a stat that he needs and that you really need to get on it. But you can also have some other substats like crit damage and crit rate that will help with his damage, and also HP, which will help with his survivability too. But again, half the time you're gonna have your shield up, so it doesn't really matter too much about the HP. Just focus on the crit stats and defense. Now let's go into the actual set. I mean, I don't have many pieces here, as you've probably spotted, but I have enough to actually show you what he needs. So starting off for his 4-piece set, you actually want to run Knight of Purity Palace. Now yeah, many people might say that this might be a bit of a boring set. I mean, it is. But what it does, it increases defense by 15% on the 2-piece, and then it also increases the max damage that can be absorbed by the shield created by the wearer by 20%. So again, it just really helps the preservation side of his whole, you know, kit and everything. And I really do suggest using this set, because it is the best one we got so far. I mean, there isn't actually a really Aventurine specific set, and I'm sure there might be one coming out in the future, I don't know. But for now, this is all we've got, and there isn't anything that just kind of works with him perfectly like many of the other characters. But if you want to be a little bit different, you could also run this 2-piece with another set like Pioneer Diver of Dead Waters, which obviously I'm using on my Acheron at the moment. You can either run that 2 and 2, or you can also run it 4-piece if you want to do more damage. But again, I don't really suggest it. I definitely suggest going for Knight of Purity Palace. And then finally for the Planisphere and the Link Rope, one of the best ones at the moment will actually be Broken Keel, because again, there isn't really any ornaments that kind of fit perfectly with Aventurine, but Broken Keel seems to be the best one so far. And to be honest, this piece here might actually be really good on him, because we got defense, we got speed. But what Broken Keel does, it increases the wearer's effect res by 10% when the wearer's effect res is 30% or higher, which obviously it will be. If we look back at his traces, he actually gives some effect res off, and all allies crit damage increases by 10%, which means he's going to be supporting his other units, which is super useful. But that isn't the only one you can use. You can also use other pieces like Inert Salsoto, which increases the wearer's crit rate by 8%, and when the wearer's current crit rate reaches 50% or higher, the wearer's ultimate and follow-up attack damage increases by 15%. I was talking about a more defensive and offensive build, and I think this is definitely more offensive, and this one is more defensive. And finally, there's one last set which could also work incredibly well too, because it increases the wearer's defense by 15%. When the wearer's effect hit rate is 50% or higher, the wearer gains an extra 15% defense. You do have to make sure the effect hit rate is high enough, so that would be another one for the substats, but you do get up to a 30% increase in your defense, which is amazing. And this piece is Belobog of the Architects. Now, I won't actually go into Eidolons because I don't think they're actually officially released yet, so I don't really want to like risk myself, you know, leaking anything. So I will make a follow-up on that if you really want to see that, and I'll just go into everything about his Eidolons and just talk about in detail whether you want to pull for them. But honestly, you kind of know the drill. If you get more Eidolons, then the better he's going to be. And I've also heard that using an energy rope and his E1 could work pretty well, so maybe try that out. But for now, I'm just going to say that if you get his Eidolons, he's going to be a better character in general. I mean, that's just the general rule. Last but not least, we're actually going to talk about his team. Now, as I said at the start, I've got my Trailblazer here instead of my Aventurine, so if you see that, just imagine her as Aventurine. They're pretty much the same. I mean, you you know, she's a preservation unit, but I'm just using her as a placeholder. As you can see, this is a very follow-up attack heavy team. As you know, Dr. Ratio deals a ton of damage with his follow-up attacks. Topaz and Nami do a lot of, you know, follow-up kind of attacks too, and Sparkle's here to do her buffing, adding skill points, you know, etc, etc. So what you want to take away from this is that Aventurine works super well with follow-up characters. He gains points of blind bet whenever a follow-up attack occurs, which is super good, and it means that you can run them with pretty much any of these. So yeah, I definitely do recommend running a Dr. Ratio of your team, or maybe a Topaz. But also, if you're more free to play, you can use other units like Herta, which, you know, she's pretty decent. I mean, I've been using her a lot more recently, and I've actually started leveling her and building her, and she's amazing too, and she does a lot of follow-up attacks and will gain you a lot of blind bet points. And if you want, you could also use someone like Himiko, which you can get on the standard banner, which is again amazing. And just any character that kind of uses follow-up attacks can be great. But the great thing about Aventurine is that he works with pretty much anyone. He can also work with Acheron too. I mean, you've probably pulled on Acheron recently because, you know, who hasn't? She's such an amazing character and does so much damage. And yes, he works with her too. And because he's a preservation character, he is super flexible and can fit into almost any team because he's protecting your characters all this time and just providing extra damage. And it means you've got all of this defense and all of these shields, also dealing damage, which a character like Huohuo or someone else or some other sustained characters which do healing won't be able to do because you're just solely prioritizing healing. So again, Aventurine is super flexible whenever it comes to characters. You can use them with pretty much anyone on this list unless you make like a whole team of preservation characters with like Japard, then, you know, definitely don't do that. I mean, you'll be super shielded, but you won't be doing much damage. But yeah, I definitely suggest having some kind of follow-up attack character in your team because it will definitely help you get more of these points. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter too much. Yeah, all in all, teams don't really matter, but I've given you a few choices in what you can have. Just kind of make do with what you've got at the moment. So yeah, that's pretty much all I've got for this video. Aventurine is an amazing character, and whenever looking into him, he looks even more exciting, which is just amazing. And I hope I've helped you actually understand his kit and what characters he needs and what relics and pretty much everything that he needs. Because he is a very defense-heavy character, and it is super great because you can use many of your old relics and stuff on him that, you know, you're like, oh, defense, but with crit damage stats and stuff like that. That would actually be a great piece for Aventurine. So definitely remember that whenever you're farming relics. But I do actually have an older video where I talk about Aventurine at length and actually go into detail about all of his traces even more, and also discuss whether you should actually pull for him in the first place. Then I definitely suggest go watching that because I really go into detail on different situations where you should and shouldn't pull for him. But yeah, if you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, then don't forget to leave a like and subscribe because it really helps. And let me know in the comments if you're going to be pulling for Aventurine or if you're going to be skipping him for a different character. And if so, which character are you going to be skipping for? Anyways, that's all. See ya.